attacked in a surprise offensive. The Vietnamese had timed it so that the South Vietnamese troops fighting on the side of the United States were all home for the holidays. And so the guerrillas were able to attack directly American troops and overwhelm them. Although they suffered heavy losses, it set off a worldwide dynamic. And all throughout the world, from the Chinese Cultural Revolution, the Naxalite movement in India, the Czechoslovakia Prague Spring, which was an uprising against Soviet domination of Czechoslovakia that led to 500,000 Russian troops being brought into Czechoslovakia to occupy it. The French May events, which sparked movements in places like Senegal, Spain, Italy, Mexico City.
In Senegal and Spain and Mexico
In Senegal, there was a student strike. In Spain, there was a strike of students and workers. In Italy, students acted directly in solidarity, attacking the French embassy. In Mexico City, students modeled themselves on what had happened in France. As we know, hundreds of students were killed in Mexico City in October before the arrival of the 1968 Olympics. But this is the year...
And of course, in those Olympics was the famous Black Power salute
Absolutely.
to black athletes from the United States.
This was also the year when Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated in the United States. And in more than 150 cities, there were riots. More damage was done to the city of Washington, D.C. than had been done by the British when they captured the city during the War of 1812. The Pentagon estimated it did not have enough troops to fight the war in Vietnam and to maintain order at home. This was truly a world historical year. The high point of the U.S. movement, that is our May 68, if you will, came in 1970, from May to September. We had the killings at Kent State and Jackson State universities, in response to which a strike of 4 million students and 500,000 faculty, that is the largest strike in the history of the United States, erupted on the campuses. We had the Women's Strike for Peace and Against Patriarchy in New York, the Chicano Moratorium in Los Angeles on August 29th, in which journalist Ruben Salazar was killed by police. And to cap it off, the high point was more than 10,000 people gathering in Philadelphia in response to the Black Panther Party's call to write a new constitution for the United States. This new constitution was internationalist. It called for an abolition of a standing army, its replacement by popular militias. It called for complete liberation of women, for communal spaces to be set aside, for children to be free. It was truly a break with the established system, much like the French May events in 1968.
And yet, what came of it?
Well, again, in the United States, we have this next generations coming up that have integrated school systems in many cities. I can't say everywhere. As we know, segregation continues to plague this society. But we certainly have increased rights for minorities in the United States. Women's status and position has changed drastically in the United States, abortion rights being just one indication. Gay liberation now is pretty commonly accepted. Of course, there's still pockets of places that just haven't been affected. But I think, again, in general, there was a cultural shift that led to greater freedoms for people who are different or who are perceived to be different.
George Katsiaficas, you actually live in South Korea and are writing your next book on the people's protests, the people's movements of Asia. What was happening then there?
Well, in 1980, Gwangju, South Korea, had an uprising against the military dictatorship in which hundreds, some people say as many as 2,000 people were killed. But what happened was that the people went up against flamethrowers and machine guns with 2x4s and shovels, and ultimately drove the military out of the city and held it for a week. In that week, they had daily meetings of tens of thousands of people, sometimes hundreds of thousands of people, and enacted a form of participatory democracy to make decisions and manage the city. Many of the policemen in the city joined the insurrection. The police chief of the city had refused to order his troops to open fire on people, and the military took him away and tortured it. The workers in Asia Motors, who were manufacturing automobiles and as well as armored cars, gave the newly produced armored cars to the insurgents. Women textile workers from Naju, busloads of them brought weapons from police stations outside of Gwangju. The miners in Hwasun brought dynamite and blasting caps. So the military was held at bay. People were able to negotiate the release of prisoners in exchange for some weapons. They were able to negotiate for more coffins for the dead. And ultimately, they were overwhelmed with military force backed by the United States. 7 years later, when news of Gwangju finally had reached a majority of South Korea, there were 19 consecutive days of illegal demonstrations involving hundreds of thousands of people, and the military was compelled to grant direct presidential elections and greater democratic liberties in South Korea. As in 1968, though, we had an international, what I call Eros effect. In other words, the movement in Gwangju helped spark movements all over Asia. 86, the Philippines, 87 in Korea and Taiwan, 88, the Burma uprising, in which tens of thousands possibly were killed. 89, we have the Tibet uprising, Tiananmen Square, 90, Bangladesh, Nepal, 92, Thailand. Each of these movements has its own story of success and failures.
George Katsiaficas, I want to thank you for being with us. I look forward to that book on the Asian popular uprisings, his latest, The Imagination of the New Left, the Global Analysis of 1968. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. When we come back, legendary author Gore Vidal.